welcome back, subscribers. Today we're going to be talking about making OCs and furry characters.
Did someone say furries?
We'll come back to that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
So you guys are here looking to make some original characters. Well, I have some tips and tricks for you guys, and these don't apply for everything. Everyone's creative process will be a little bit different, so give and take throughout this whole process. But I would also like to add a small disclaimer here that there are two major things that I will not be going into detail of, and I'll probably make a separate video of, and that is slight controversies of people being scared away from making characters. I'm gonna say right off the bat here, if you guys didn't have internet, you wouldn't know about the thousands of people who have similar ideas to you who could potentially be living your double life. But they're not you. And that's what's important in that whole thing, is that you are your own creative person. And I'm gonna say as my second thing, don't get discouraged if someone out there is making something and you're like, oh, someone's already made what I was gonna make, it's too late, or I'm going to get in trouble because it's gonna look too similar. Bear in mind that everyone's creative process will be differently, and as long as you are not blatantly going out there and trying to steal or literally live someone else's life, you guys should be fine to making your own original characters. And it is different when making fan characters that could exist in the world versus making a completely original world or just a one-off character that you want to either have just made for fun or sell. So, let's get started. Making a character completely from scratch. The way that I end up making my characters from scratch, I have a few steps and processes, and this can apply to any character, whether you're making a fan character for a pre-existing universe, your own original character just out of the top of your head, or you're just making it for an adopt. Bear in mind that this works for all of these. The first step that I take into account when making a character is the shape and form. What do I want the character to look like? Do I want them to be masculine, feminine, non-binary? Do I want them to be a bug? Do I want them to be a cat? Do I want them to be a person? All of these taken into account, and I have several characters that I have made from scratch by doing this, where I wasn't 100% sure on what form I wanted them to take, so I started scribbling down a ton of thumbnails and multiple sketches. Bear in mind, this is a tip. Try and make multiple sketches of the same character, because you might not like the first one that you make, and you might not even like the fifth one that you make. Adding on to the shape of the character is then the body parts and the materials that they are made out of. Perhaps the character is made out of fire and it's an elemental. Perhaps it's just flesh and bone. Perhaps it's a space dragon and it's made out of the cosmos itself. And so on and so forth. With the body parts of the character, the next thing that could be taken into account is the age of the character. Are they young? Are they in the middle age? Are they elderly? Or do they just never age? Taking into account that can help you with the body parts that they have, and perhaps the personality. If they're older, perhaps maybe they've been through so much where they feel like the world is their oyster and they can't be touched, or perhaps they're young and scared and they don't really want to go out and risk the adventures because perhaps they had something happen in their past that scared them. So on and so forth can be taken into account. As well as also, if you're still struggling to try and fill in some gaps, think about the accessories and appearance changes of the character that you would have in mind at the point in time of making the character. Do you want them to have scars? Do you want them to have jewelry? Do you want them to be wearing rags? Give a few extra sort of perks to the character. And I will say that I have on screen two characters. I feel like both of these character designs are valid in their own respective worlds, because perhaps one is in a very simplistic world where it's got very minimalistic kind of features that are required, versus the other one which perhaps is a very intense world and has a lot of personality to it, and there's a reason behind every part of the character, the colors, their personality, everything. Moving forward with this, if you are still struggling with the character design, and remember this is just a reference sheet, and you can make many different sketches, if you're not happy with the first or even the fifth version of it, try going with the 5 W's of who, what, when, where, why, and also how, taken into account for the character, because you as the creator would know the character best. Perhaps sitting down either by yourself or with someone else and having someone or yourself asking the character the questions. What I mean by this is, if you put yourself in the character's shoes, could you answer the questions for the character, because this character would be created by you and sort of be brought to life by you. Perhaps what's their favorite story if they're a kid, perhaps what's their favorite food. Perhaps they have a favorite outfit. Where do they go when they have free time? What do they do if they're in a dangerous situation? Stuff like this that you could ask the character to try to build up the character and figure out who or what they are. Moving forward to the next process, which is making a character based off of one or so pre-existing traits of the character. Breaking down the character, let's say you already have an unfinished sketch of a tiger or a robot or something like this, or perhaps you have a name, perhaps you have Ella or Tony or something like this where you have just a few parts of it, but you're missing a few of those steps. Taking what you have and adding to them, and not being afraid to continue on with the design or even changing some of the pre-existing traits of the character, and at this point in time, perhaps taking into account the world that the character is in. If it's a fan world, would the character fit into the world with the way that they are now? Or perhaps if it's your own original creation, does what you have drawn out match the world? Let's say you have a character that needs to go into space, however, you have a robot character that is fragile and it's made just simply out of aluminum cans. Trying to put aluminum cans in space with some science knowledge would probably, with the pressure and such, crush them, so maybe needing to redesign or reinforce some armor or something of that sort for the character could be put into establishing. Same thing with if you have a dragon character in a world, is that dragon character the main part of the universe, or is it perhaps seen as a danger? Is the character going to have to worry about being attacked by humans or bandits or other dragons? Stuff like that to be taken into account when making the character further from that point. The third step that I have is for pre-existing characters that have more than a few reference sheets. They actually have comics or written out stories or many different illustrations made of them, something that has been existing for so long that you just kind of look at it and you're like, I want to change this character, redesign the character, because there's just some things about it that you don't like, and perhaps it can be scary. You're like, I've had this character for so long, I don't really know what I really want to do with it. Trying to rethink where the character fits into their world might be a start. Perhaps the character that you have doesn't fit to where it would have with its old reference and all the old illustrations, and the personality just doesn't match up to where you're at now. I have had to do this a couple times with my characters when making the Dawn of Gales, because some of the characters that I thought would fit into this universe, the more I think about it, the more it's just like, these are just extra characters that just wouldn't make sense in this world and would probably fit better in another story that I have. It's okay if you have a bunch of characters and you had to break down a few of them. Having a flood of characters that you don't know what to do with can be a bit hard to manage, so trying to make sort of like either folders or sections for the characters, try to break them up, whether it's by species or by size or whatever category you feel is best to breaking down the characters, to have them in a more manageable state, to know then what you want to do with them. And perhaps you just really don't want to use some of these characters in the story. That is okay, because perhaps maybe down the line you might redesign them and reutilize them in a new way. I had this actually happen with my main villain character, Diesel. I was unsure of what to do with him, and when I went back on my computer I found this old design of him, and it looks very scary. The design was more goat-like than anything, rather than his current presence, which is more white wolf-like, and I had thought, do I keep him like this, or do I change him? I was so set in the fact that I had to keep the old design that I was too scared to move forward. But finally, push came to shove and I redesigned him, and I love his redesign more than the old one. I don't think he'll be going through any more redesigns, but for the story, he might have some appearance changes later on down the line. Same thing with most of my characters, where the reference sheets that I have could be the most current and up-to-date, but they might have some changes down the line versus a complete redesign. And with all of that said, that's just kind of my rough way of how I make original characters in 3 different ways, of completely from scratch, from a few pre-existing sketches or tons of pre-existing content, and you want to redesign it completely. If there's anything that I didn't cover in this video, or if you guys want me to make a part 2, please let me know in the comments section down below. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not already part of that subscriber squad, please consider putting your paws to that subscribe button and turn on the notification button, because YouTube doesn't like to notify you guys, for weekly content on Wednesdays and Sundays, as well as also, if you are new, please check out my Linktree. There is a Patreon, a Redbubble, and many different social medias where you can see the illustrations that I have, where I post pretty much every other day. as well as also twice a month on Fridays, I upload webtoons of a comic called The Dawn of Gales, which is where most of these characters are going to be featured in, as well as also a second comic called Twilight of Serpents. Thank you all so much for making it to the end of the video, subscribblers, and thank you for 220 plus subscribblers. You guys are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!